Good day everyone, good day ma'am. I'm Elaiza Taculod from BS Stream 3B, and right I'm going to report the chapter 13 entitled Labor Law. So we have here the learning objectives. First is to enumerate the classification of employees, their benefits, privileges, and policies affecting them, identify some best practices in handling human resources in tourism establishments, and identify the procedures in handling sexual harassment in the workplace, and lastly, explain the rights of workers employed in tourism establishments. The tourism industry, with its labor-intensive nature, is prone to many labor issues. Hence, labor law plays a vital role in the efficient operation of the various business enterprises related to tourism. And this chapter deals with important provisions governing labor laws, as well as the benefits, privileges, and policies affecting employees. So first, we have here the constitutional provisions on labor. Section 3. The state shall afford full protection to labor local and overseas, organized and unorganized, and promote full employment and equality of employment opportunities for all. It shall guarantee the rights of all workers to self-organization, collective bargaining and negotiations, and peaceful concerted activities, including the right to strike in accordance with law. They shall be entitled to security of tenure, human conditions of work, and a living wage, and they shall also participate in policy and decision-making processes affecting the rights and benefits as may be provided by law. The state shall promote the principle of shared responsibility between the workers and employers, and the preferential use of voluntary modes in settling disputes, including conciliation, and shall enforce their mutual compliance therewith to foster industrial peace. The state also shall regulate the relations between workers and employers, recognizing the right of labor to its share in the fruits of production and the right of enterprises to reasonable returns of investments and to expansion and growth. We have here also the section 14. The state shall protect working women by providing safe and healthful working conditions, taking into account their maternal functions and such facilities and opportunities that will enhance their welfare and enable them to realize their full potential in the service of the nation. Section 15. The state shall respect the rule of independent people's organizations to enable the people to pursue and protect within the democratic framework and their legitimate and collective interests and aspirations through peaceful and lawful means. Section 16. The right of the people and their organizations to effectively and reasonably participate at all levels of social and political and economic decision-making shall not be abridged, and the state shall by law facilitate the establishments of adequate consultation mechanisms. We have here also the discussion of the law. Labor, whether local or overseas, organized or not organized, shall be given constitutional protection. The right to strike, although already a part of the right to self-organization, is specially mentioned. The right to a living wage is expressly stated. A wage is a living wage if it is adequate to sustain a worker and his family in dignity. The state shall promote shared responsibility between workers and employers. Thus, the workers shall also participate in policy and decision-making processes affecting the rights and benefits as may be provided by law. In this regard, the law may provide for consultations with workers or their unions, and the union, which is the collective bargaining agent, may be represented in the governing body of an enterprise, whose opinion voicing that of the union he represents may be taken into account by the management. The recognition by the state of the right of labor to its just share in the fruits of production and the right of enterprises to reasonable returns on investments, as well as to expansion and growth, may be considered as equal to the rule that the principle of shared responsibility between workers and employers must be promoted by the state. The words just share in the fruits of productions means that should not cover only basic salaries or other employment benefits, but may also cover profit sharing. The state also protects the rights of the working women by assuring them safe and healthful conditions and opportunities to maximize their full potential in the service of the nation. We have here the different classification of employees. Employees of a company may be classified as follows: regular employees, casual employees, seasonal employees, project employees, probationary employees, employees for a fixed term, overseas Filipino workers, of special workers, apprentice, learners, and handicapped workers. Regular employees, the employees who are deemed regular are those who have been engaged to perform activities which are usually necessary or desirable in the usual trade or business of the employer, and those casual employees who have rendered at least 1 year of service, whether such service is continuous or broken with respect to the activity in which they are employed. Those casual employees who have rendered at least 1 year of service, whether such service is continuous or broken with respect to the activity in which they are employed. An employee who is allowed to work after a probationary period, and a worker supplied by a labor-only contractor to the principal shall be considered regular employees of the latter. Moving forward, we have here the casual employees. Casual employees are those whose employment is neither regular, project, nor seasonal as defined under Article 280 of the Labor Code. There is casual employment where an employee is engaged to perform a job, work, or service which is merely incidental to the business of the employer, and such job, work, or service is for a definite period made known to the employee at the time of engagement, provided that any employee who has rendered at least 1 year of service, whether such service is continuous or not, shall be considered a regular employee with respect to the activity in which he is employed, and his employment shall continue while such activity exists. Next, as we have here, the seasonal employees are those whose work or services in nature and the employment is for the duration of the season. Regular seasonal employees are those called to work from time to time. The nature of their relationship with the employer is such that during off-season they are temporarily laid off, but during summer season they are re-employed or when their services may be needed. They are not strictly speaking separated from the service, but are merely considered as on leave of absence without pay until they are re-employed. Their employment relationship is never severed but only suspended. As such, those employees can be considered as in the regular employment of the employer. In effect, these seasonal regular employees enjoy security of tenure and cannot be dismissed without just cause. Next, as we have here, the project employees. A project employee is one whose employment has been fixed for a specific project or undertaking, the completion or termination of which has been determined at the time of engagement of the employee, or where the work or services to be performed is seasonal in nature and the employment is for the duration of the season. The principal test for determining whether an employee is a project employee or a regular employee is whether the project employee was assigned to carry out a specific project or undertaking, the duration and scope of which were specified at the time the employee was engaged for that project. Failure of the employer to file termination reports after every project completion with the nearest public employment office is an indication that an employee was not and is not a project employee. Next, as we have here, the probationary employees. A probationary employee is one who is on trial by an employer during which the employer determines whether or not he is qualified for permanent employment. Probationary employment shall not exceed 6 months from the date the employee started working. In all cases of probationary employment, the employer shall make known to the employee the standards under which he will qualify as a regular employee at the time of his engagement. Where no standards are made known to the employee at the time, and he shall be deemed a regular employee. Probationary employment shall be governed by the following rules: where the work for which the employee has been engaged is learnable or apprenticeable in accordance with the standards prescribed by the Department of Labor and Employment, and the period of probationary employment shall be limited to the authorized learnership or apprenticeship period which is applicable, where the work is neither learnable nor apprenticeable, and the service of any employee who has been engaged on probationary basis may be terminated only for a just or authorized cause when he fails to qualify as a regular employee in accordance with reasonable standards prescribed by the employer. It is settled that a probationary employee enjoys only a temporary employment status, not a permanent status. In general items, he is terminable anytime as long as such termination is made before the expiration of the 6-month probationary period. The employment of a probationary employee may only be terminated either for a just cause or when the employee fails to qualify as a regular employee in accordance with reasonable standards made known to him by the employer at the start of the employment. The power of the employer to terminate an employee on probation is subject to the following conditions. It must be exercised in accordance with the specific requirements of the contract. The dissatisfaction on the part of the employer must be real and in good faith, not prejudicial so as to violate the contract or the law. There must be no unlawful discrimination in the dismissal, and the burden of proving just or valid cause for dismissing an employee rests on the employer. Next, as we have here, the employees for a fixed term. These are employees covered in employment contracts providing the term employment or fixed period employment. Stipulations providing for a fixed period employment are valid when the period agreed upon has been knowingly and voluntarily agreed by the parties without force, duress, or improper pressure exerted on the employee, and when such stipulations were not designed to circumvent the laws on the security of tenure. The following are the guidelines which must be observed in order for fixed contracts of employment may not be conservant security of tenure. The fixed period of employment was knowingly and voluntarily agreed upon by the parties without any force, duress, or improper pressure being brought to bear upon the employee and absent any circumstances vitiating his consent, or it is satisfactorily appears that the employer and employee dealt with each other on more or less equal terms with no moral dominance whatever being exercised with the former on the latter. Next, we have here also the overseas Filipino workers, also referred as migrant workers. Overseas Filipino workers refers to a person who is to be engaged, is engaged, or has been engaged on a remunerated activity in a state of which he or she is not a legal resident. A person to be engaged in a remunerated activity refers to an applicant worker who has been promised or assured employment overseas and acting on such promise or assurance sustains damage and or injury, and the law which governs overseas employment is Republic Act 8042 or the Migrant Workers and Overseas Filipino Acts of 1995. Next, as we have here, the Labor Management Council. Under Article 255 of the Labor Code, it reserves the right of an individual employee or group of employees, ununionized or non-unionized, to present grievances to their employer at any time, with or without collective bargaining, with or without exclusive bargaining representatives. And the Department of Labor and Employment promotes the formation of Labor Management Council (LMC) in organized and unorganized establishments. An LMC, either as council or committee, can serve as a forum where management and employees may air their concerns short of collective bargaining. It is largely a communication mechanism, which includes prevention or resolution of disputes, harnessed to the fullest and is given the sincerity, confidence, and maturity of both sides. LMC can effectively secure industrial peace provided it maintains its integrity. In fact, an LMC can be so effective it can make a labor union unnecessary. Labor Management Council require that employees' representatives should be elected by the employees, not hand-picked by management. Next, as we have here, the benefits, privileges, policies affecting employees. Minimum wage. The virtue of Republic Act number 6727, Wage Rationalization Act, that the determination of minimum wage rates are now within the function of the regional tripartite and productivity board, and the concept of minimum wage means more than setting a floor wage to upgrade existing wages, and a minimum wages underlies the effort of the state to promote productivity improvement and gain sharing measures to ensure a decent standard of living for the workers and their families, to affirm labor as a primary social economic force. Collective bargaining. This means conferring promptly and in good faith for negotiating agreements with respect to wages, hours of work, and entering into written contracts called collective bargaining agreement or CBA, adjustments of grievances, and the provisions commonly found in collective bargaining elements are enumeration or reservation of management rights, union recognition and security, wage and fringe benefits under administration, physical working conditions, selected personnel management and plant operation practices, grievance and arbitration duration of contract. The parties to collective bargaining are the employer and employees represented by the labor union. While it is a mutual obligation of the parties to bargain, the employer is not under any legal duty to initiate contract negotiation. The mechanics of collective bargaining are set in motion only when the following conditions are present: in the possession of a status of majority representation of the employee's representative in accordance with any of the means of selection or designation provided for by the labor code. We have here also the death benefits. Under the Social Security law, upon the death of a member who has paid at least 36 monthly contributions prior to the semester of death, his primary beneficiaries shall be entitled to the monthly pension, provided that if he has no primary beneficiaries, his secondary beneficiaries shall be entitled to a lump sum benefit equivalent 36 times the monthly pension. If he has not paid the required 36 monthly contributions, his primary and secondary beneficiaries shall be entitled to a lump sum benefit equivalent to the monthly pension times the number of monthly contributions paid to the SSS, or 12 times the monthly pension, whichever is higher. A funeral grant equivalent to 12,000 pesos shall be paid in cash or in kind to help defray the cost of funeral expenses upon the death of a member, including permanently totally disabled member or retiree. In case of work-related deaths, beneficiaries will receive death benefits under the Employees' Compensation and State Insurance Funds, in addition to the benefits under the SSS law. Accordingly, the amount under the Employees' Compensation Fund shall be the amount equivalent to his monthly benefits, plus 10% thereof for each dependent child, but not exceeding 5. The Employees' Compensation Commission has increased the funeral benefits to 10,000 pesos. Moving forward, we have here also the health benefits. This includes sickness, medical, and hospitalization benefits. Under the Social Security law, a member who has paid at least 3 monthly contributions in the 12-month period immediately preceding the semesters of sickness or injury and is confined more than 3 days in a hospital or elsewhere with the approval of the SSS shall be paid a daily sickness benefit equivalent to 90% of his average daily salary credit. In case of work-related sickness, the covered employee will be entitled to medical services, appliances, and supplies, in addition to the benefits under the SSS law. Drug testing. Under Republic Act No. 9165, June 7, 2002, also known as the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002, drug testing shall be done by any government forensic laboratories or by any of the drug testing laboratories accredited and monitored by the Department of Health or the DOH to safeguard the quality of test results. Drug test certificates issued by accredited drug testing centers shall be valid for 1 year period from the date of issue, which may be used for other purposes. In this regards, employers are mandated to provide accompanying work rules and regulations or random drug testing for purposes of reducing the risk in workplace. Accordingly, officers and employees shall be subjected to undergo random drug testing. Any officer or employee found positive for use of dangerous drugs shall be dealt with administratively, which shall be a ground for suspension or termination subject to the provisions of Article 282 of the Labor Code. Moving forward, we have here also the retirement. Under Article 287 of the Labor Code, as amended by Republic Act No. 7641, also known as the New Retirement Law, any employee may be retired upon reaching the retirement age established in the collective bargaining agreement or other applicable employment contract. In the absence of a retirement plan or agreement providing for retirement benefits of employees in establishments, an employee upon reaching the age of 60 years or more than, but not beyond 65 years, which is hereby declared the compulsory retirement age, who has served at least 5 years and the said establishment may retire and shall be entitled to a retirement pay equivalent to at least 1/2 month's salary for every year of service, a fraction of at least 6 months being considered as one whole year. We have here also the uniform policies. Some tourism establishments, which include but not limited to restaurants, department stores, rest areas and gasoline stations, deluxe and first-class hotels, tourist inns, special interest resorts, apartments, motels, and those engaged in motor transport services require their employees and staff to be well-groomed and should wear clean and smart uniforms. Uniform policies in the establishments are prerequisite requirements in order to be accredited by the Department of Tourism. And next, we have here also the SSS PhilHealth Employees Compensation Commission and Pag-ibig. Employees in the private sector are covered under the SSS law, wherein the mission is to promote and perfect a sound and viable tax-exempt social security system suitable to the needs of the people, which shall provide meaningful protection to members and their beneficiaries against hazards of disability, sickness, maternity, old age, death, and other contingencies resulting in loss of income or beneficial burden. PhilHealth assumed the responsibility of administering the former Medicare program for private sector employees with its landmark transfer of the Social Security system. With this transfer came the turnover of the health insurance funds, initially totaling $14 billion from the SSS, and the amount covers employees and employers' shares in the medical care program. The benefit package includes the following categories of personal health services: inpatient hospital care, room and board, services of health care professionals, diagnostic, laboratory, and other medical examination services, use of surgical or medical equipment and facilities, prescription drugs, and biological subject to limitations stated in Section 37 of RA 7875, and inpatient education packages, outpatient care, service of health care professionals, diagnostic, laboratory, and other medical examination services, personal preventive services, prescription drugs and biologicals, emergency and transfer services. An employee may also recover from the employee's compensation and state insurance fund in case of work-related disabilities. We have here also the sexual harassment and the workplace. Under Republic Act No. 7877, also known as the Sexual Harassment Act of 1995, sexual harassment is committed by the employer, employee manager, supervisor, agent of the employee manager, supervisor, agent of an employee, or any other person who having authority, influence, or moral ascendancy over another in a work environment demands, requires, or other requires any favor for the others, regardless of whether the demand requirement for submission is accepted or not. The above acts would impair the employee rights and privileges under existing labor laws, or the above acts would result in an intimidating, hostile, or offensive environment for the employee. In this regard, it shall be the duty of the employer to prevent, to deter the commission of the act of sexual harassment, and promulgate appropriate rules and regulations in consultation with and jointly approve of employers prescribing the procedure for the investigation of sexual harassment cases and the administrative sanctions. And lastly, we have here the best labor practices in tourism establishments. This topic has been added to enable the readers to appreciate the best labor practices of selected tourism establishments from the lodging industry, travel agency, tour operators, transportation companies, food service industry, and tourist sites. It will be noted that 90% of the selected respondents agree that it is imperative to have a proactive and supportive human resources department, which will be instrumental in enhancing the welfare of the employees and helping the company towards its growth and investments. An open door policy with the president or general manager of the company is most welcome, as it has been proven to be the most effective means of removing the barriers of communication and enhancing a shared responsibility of nationhood between capital and labor. And that's the end of my report. Thank you and have a good day.